Write a story where Vegeta fights Pui Pui again. Vegeta knows he easily overpowers Pui Pui but decides to hold back his power. In the middle of the fight, Vegeta punches Pui Pui in the throat, breaking his laugh box. At first nothing happens and Pui Pui coughs and gags. But then he starts to laugh. It starts off as small chuckles and then turns into a full-blown loud uncontrollable laugh. He drops to the floor laughing, rolling on the floor, and clutching his chest. Vegeta is confused and horrified. The laugh gets painful and Pui Pui cries and begs for help. Pui Pui then dies from laughing. Vegeta is neutral and confused and then leaves.
Vegeta had heard rumors that Pui Pui, the warrior he had easily defeated before, had somehow gained more strength and was eager for a rematch. Vegeta knew that he was still far more powerful than Pui Pui, but he decided to hold back his full power and make the fight more challenging. As they fought, Vegeta was careful not to unleash his full strength, instead relying on his skill and technique to keep the battle interesting. However, in the heat of the moment, Vegeta delivered a swift punch to Pui Pui's throat, not realizing the full extent of his own strength. At first, Pui Pui coughed and gagged, struggling to breathe. Vegeta was surprised but not too concerned, assuming that Pui Pui would recover soon enough. However, as time passed, Pui Pui's reaction became increasingly bizarre. He started to laugh uncontrollably, his laughter growing louder and more manic by the second. Vegeta was confused and horrified as he watched Pui Pui drop to the ground, rolling around and clutching his chest in pain. The laughter was now becoming so painful that Pui Pui was crying and begging for help. But Vegeta was unsure of what to do. He had never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, Pui Pui's laughter subsided, and he lay motionless on the ground. Vegeta realized with a shock that Pui Pui had died from laughing too hard. Vegeta was left feeling neutral and confused as he left the scene, unsure of what to make of the strange turn of events. He had not meant to kill Pui Pui, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of detachment from the tragedy that had just unfolded before him. He knew that he would have to be more careful with his power in the future, lest he accidentally cause harm to those around him.
Write a story where brothers 15-year-old David and 12-year-old Tim are visiting their 14-year-old friend Josh at the Lake of the Ozarks. After a fun day of going fishing on a boat, swimming, playing video games, and more, they go to bed. David decides to play a prank. He puts a weight at the end of Josh's bed. That way when he gets in bed his foot will bump into the cold heavy object. David sleeps on the couch, Tim sleeps on a spare mattress, and Josh sleeps in his bed. As they get in, Josh gets on the bed, lifts the covers, and puts his legs in. A clink sound is heard and Josh moans in pain. "Ah!" Josh says. David and Tim look over. "Ah! Ah! Ah! Ah!" Josh says, clutching his foot. He grabs the weight, lifts it, and drops it off his bed. It lands on the floor with a loud thump. David laughs and Tim is confused. Josh says it felt like his toe spilt open, over-exaggerating the pain.
The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the Lake of the Ozarks as David, Tim, and their friend Josh wrapped up a day filled with adventure. The trio had spent their time fishing on a small boat, swimming in the crystal clear water, and engaging in intense video game battles. As the night settled in, the boys decided it was time to hit the hay. The lake breeze gently rustled the curtains in Josh's cabin as they prepared for a good night's sleep. David, being the mischievous older brother, couldn't resist the temptation to play a harmless prank. While Josh was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, David sneaked into the room with a sly grin. He grabbed a heavy fishing weight and strategically placed it at the foot of Josh's bed, hidden beneath the covers. David suppressed a giggle, thinking about the surprised reaction he would get. The sleeping arrangements were settled. David on the couch, Tim on a spare mattress, and Josh comfortably in his bed. As Josh got into bed and lifted the covers, he unknowingly encountered the cold, heavy object that David had placed there. A sudden clink echoed through the room, followed by a muffled "ah" from Josh. David and Tim turned their heads in unison to witness the unexpected turn of events. Josh clutched his foot, feigning agony. Ah! 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 Josh groaned, making sure to exaggerate the pain for added effect. He reached down, feeling the weight and lifting it in the air before dramatically dropping it onto the floor with a loud thump. David burst into laughter, thoroughly entertained by the success of his prank. Tim, on the other hand, was left bewildered, trying to make sense of the situation. "What happened?" Tim asked, looking between the laughing David and the still moaning Josh. "It felt like my toe split open," Josh exclaimed, continuing to overplay the pain for dramatic effect. He shot a playful glare at David, who was enjoying every moment of the prank. After a moment of shared laughter, the boys settled down for the night, with the memory of the prank lingering in the air. The Lake of the Ozarks held not only the echoes of genuine joy, but also the playful spirit of brotherhood and friendship.
Write a story about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory where after signing the contract Wonka opens the door to the small and skinny hallway. He tells everyone to go though the other door and everyone runs in. But there isn't another door in the small cramped room and everyone is stuck and pushing each other. Wonka says, "Now I know there's another door here somewhere." He pushes though everyone and pats his hand on the door they originally came though. "Oh, here we are," Wonka says. Mr. Beauregard says, "Wow, don't be a darn fool, Wonka. That's the way we came in." Wonka opens the door and reveals an entirely new room. But then he quickly steps out and closes the door, locking everyone in the small cramped hallway. Everyone screams for help and yells at Wonka to let them out as Wonka laughs.
Willy Wonka was known for his eccentricities and his love for chocolate. He was a man of mystery, always keeping everyone guessing what he would do next. And when he announced that he would be opening his chocolate factory to the public, everyone was eager to get a glimpse inside. On the day of the tour, a group of lucky winners gathered outside the factory, anxiously awaiting their chance to see what wonders lay inside. Wonka greeted them with a smile and led them into a small and skinny hallway. "Please, follow me," he said, gesturing towards the other door. "This way, my dear friends." The winners rushed forward, eager to see what lay ahead. But as they entered the small, cramped room, they realized that there was no other door in sight. They turned around to see Wonka, who was now scratching his head and looking puzzled. "Now, where did that door go?" he muttered. The winners began to panic, pushing and shoving each other in an effort to find a way out. Wonka, however, seemed unfazed. He walked through the crowd and patted his hand on the door they had just come through. "Oh, here we are," he exclaimed, grinning widely. Mr. Beauregard spoke up. "Wow, don't be a darn fool, Wonka. That's the way we came in." But Wonka paid him no mind, and instead opened the door to reveal an entirely new room, full of candy and chocolate and other sweets. The winners cheered and rushed forward, their eyes wide with excitement. But as they entered the room, Wonka quickly stepped out and closed the door, locking everyone inside. The winners screamed for help and banged on the door, begging Wonka to let them out. But Wonka just stood outside, laughing and cackling like a madman. "You see, my dear friends," he shouted through the door, "I have always been a man of mystery, and now I have given you a taste of my world. Enjoy." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving the winners trapped inside the small and cramped room, surrounded by candy and chocolate but unable to enjoy it.
Write a story where Willy Wonka is in Drake and Josh's room that is covered in candy and chocolates and has a chocolate pool as Drake and Josh look in awe. Wonka smiles and says, "Welcome to your new room, boys," standing there with a smile with his hand rested on his face and the other hand holding his cane. Wonka tells them they won a secret contest much to their surprise. Wonka then dances and sings, "Pure Imagination."
Drake and Josh could hardly believe their eyes. As they walked into their room, their jaws dropped in amazement. Everywhere they looked, there were sweets, chocolates, and candy galore. It was like stepping into a dreamland made entirely of sugary treats. And there, standing in the middle of the room, was Willy Wonka himself, looking dapper as ever with his top hat and cane. "Welcome to your new room, boys," he said, grinning from ear to ear. "I hope you like it." Drake and Josh were speechless. They looked at each other, then back at Wonka, unsure if this was all real. "How did this happen?" Josh finally managed to ask. "You won a secret contest, my dear boys," Wonka replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief. The two brothers exchanged a surprised look before turning back to Wonka, still in disbelief. "And now it's time to celebrate," Wonka exclaimed, throwing his cane aside and breaking into a dance. Drake and Josh watched in amazement as Wonka twirled and jumped around the room, all the while singing the classic song Pure Imagination. As the song ended, Wonka paused and looked at the boys with a twinkle in his eye. "So, what do you think?" Drake and Josh were still processing everything that had just happened, but they knew one thing for sure. This was going to be the best room ever. "Thank you, Mr. Wonka," Drake said, beaming. "Yeah, this is amazing," Josh added, still looking around in wonder. Willy Wonka smiled, pleased with their reaction. "You're welcome, boys. Now go enjoy your new room. The possibilities are endless." And with that, he twirled his cane, gave a nod of his head, and disappeared in a cloud of candy dust. Drake and Josh looked at each other, grinning from ear to ear. They couldn't wait to start exploring their new room, and with Willy Wonka as their guide, they knew that anything was possible.
Write a story where Harry finds a magical picture of Dumbledore. In the picture, Dumbledore is standing leaning back and forth. Suddenly he falls backwards and makes a weird yelp sound in reverse. But halfway though falling, he stops and goes back up straight again. He stands leaning back and forth before starting to fall over again and make the reverse yelp sound. Once again halfway though, he stops and goes back forward like a VHS in rewind. He leans back and forth and once more falls backward, making the yelp sound in reverse before going back up straight. This process continued on and on. Confused, Harry asked Dumbledore about it. Dumbledore chuckled and said he remembers it. In the dimly lit attic of the
old Gryffindor house, Harry stumbled upon an ornate frame tucked away amidst dusty old trinkets and forgotten heirlooms. As he approached, a soft glow emanated from within, drawing him closer. When Harry finally reached the frame, he found himself face to face with a peculiar sight, a magical moving picture of Albus Dumbledore. In the picture, Dumbledore stood with his trademark twinkle in his eyes, but something seemed off, like he was swaying back and forth, almost as if he were dancing to a silent tune. Then, without warning, he suddenly lurched backward, emitting a strange yelp that seemed to echo in reverse. Harry's eyes widened in astonishment as he watched Dumbledore's bizarre antics. Halfway through his fall, Dumbledore froze in midair as if caught in a time loop. Then, with an abrupt jerk, he straightened up again, resuming his swaying motion. This surreal sequence repeated itself over and over, leaving Harry utterly perplexed. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Harry blurted out, "Professor Dumbledore, what on earth is happening in this picture?" At the sound of Harry's voice, Dumbledore's eyes twinkled even brighter, and he chuckled softly. "Ah, my dear boy, I see you've stumbled upon one of my more eccentric moments," he said, his voice carrying an air of amusement. Harry frowned, still trying to make sense of the strange spectacle before him. "But why are you falling backward and then suddenly freezing halfway through?" he asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. Dumbledore's smile widened as he leaned in closer to the frame. "Ah, that?" he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "You see, this picture captures a rather amusing incident from my past. I was experimenting with a new spell, a rather unorthodox one, I must admit, that had some rather unexpected consequences." As Dumbledore spoke, the scene in the picture played out once more, with him swaying back and forth before tumbling backward and emitting the peculiar yelp in reverse. Harry watched in fascination as Dumbledore repeated the same motions, seemingly trapped in a never-ending loop. "It seems I inadvertently created a spell that, shall we say, had a few glitches," Dumbledore continued with a chuckle. "But fear not, my boy, I managed to reverse the effects soon after, though it appears that this particular moment has been immortalized in this enchanted picture." Harry couldn't help but laugh along with Dumbledore, the absurdity of the situation finally sinking in. As he watched the picture replaying Dumbledore's antics, he realized that even the wisest and most powerful wizards were not immune to moments of folly and whimsy. And so, With a newfound appreciation for the quirks of magic and the enigmatic nature of his beloved headmaster, Harry left the attic, the sound of Dumbledore's laughter echoing in his mind.
Write a story where Frieza and his army are in their spaceship and traveling through space. But one of the henchmen accidentally presses the eject button, which causes the door to open. All of Frieza's henchmen are sent into the vacuum of space, crying for help and screaming. Frieza's father is next as he holds on to a door, but the door breaks off and he drifts off screaming for help. Zarbon, Dodoria, and Apple hold on to each other for dear life, but they lose grip and drift off to different directions in space. Frieza is the last one as he holds on as best he can. But he too loses his grip and spins in circles until he hits his head on the door hinge. He then gets hit by an asteroid and is sent into the unknown screaming for help. Meanwhile, a henchman who was in the bathroom when all of this happened sees the now empty room. He looks for Frieza and everyone else. He then looks out the door only to fall and slip out and drifts off into space, calling for help to the ship that isn't there.
In the darkest reaches of space, Frieza, the tyrannical emperor, sat upon his opulent spaceship, surrounded by his loyal army. The vessel glided through the cosmic expanse, its engines humming with power. Frieza reveled in the absolute control he possessed over his dominion. Unbeknownst to anyone, a simple henchman named Bert, whose primary job was cleaning the ship, clumsily maneuvered his way through the cramped corridors. Oblivious to the gravity of his actions, he bumped into a control panel, inadvertently pressing the dreaded eject button. With a hiss and a sudden lurch, the spaceship's colossal door slid open, exposing the crew to the unforgiving vacuum of space. Chaos ensued as Frieza's henchmen were thrust out into the void, their cries for help mixing with the piercing sound of their screams. Frieza's father, King Cold, grasped onto the door with all his might, his aged hands trembling. But the immense force proved too much, and with a heartbreaking snap, the door broke away, condemning the king to the same fate as his loyal minions. Zarbon, Dodoria, and Apple clung to each other desperately, their strength waning as they fought against the relentless pull of space. However, their grip faltered, and one by one, they lost their hold, drifting off in separate directions, their pleas for salvation dissipating into the void. Frieza, the mighty emperor himself, fought against the imminent doom that surrounded him. He clutched onto any solid surface he could find, desperately resisting the gravitational forces that threatened to tear him apart. But even his power was no match for the cruel whims of fate. As he spun helplessly, his head collided with the unforgiving door hinge, disorienting him further. A stray asteroid careened into his path, delivering the final blow that sent him hurtling into the unknown, his anguished cries echoing into the emptiness. Meanwhile, unaware of the catastrophe that had befallen the ship, a henchman named Gregor emerged from the bathroom, startled to find an empty vessel before him. He frantically searched for Frieza and his comrades, panic welling up within him. With mounting desperation, Gregor rushed to the ship's door, hoping for a glimpse of his comrades. However, in his haste, he slipped and tumbled out into the abyss, his voice fading away as he called out for help to a ship that was no longer there to respond. As the spaceship continued its trajectory through the cosmos, now devoid of life, the once feared army of Frieza, conquerors of worlds, were scattered among the stars, their cries silenced by the unfeeling void. The universe stood witness to the fall of an empire, a spectacle of loss and desperation, leaving behind only the lingering echoes of their tragic demise.